The latest must-have accessory for primary school children. That is how I saw smartphones being described the other day on a prominent school's website, and it stopped me in my tracks. In the UK, 77% of children now have smartphones, and nearly half of those are primary school children. Yes, primary school. Education Minister Nick Gibb has now called for us to follow France and ban smartphones in schools. And Mr. Gibb, when it comes to primaries, I could not agree with you more. In fact, I would go a step further and say this to parents. Stop buying your young children smartphones. Why on earth a 10-year-old needs a smartphone worth hundreds of pounds is simply beyond me. So allow me to help you and tell you this really clearly. They don't need one. It's time for parents to come together and agree not to buy their young kids smartphones, because this really is pester power gone a step too far.
I'm totally with you on this, Michelle. I can't stand seeing young kids with their heads in their phones all day. I understand that, you know, there's a little bit of keep up the Joneses with kids, that's fine, but it doesn't need it doesn't need to extend to kids in primary school. The worst thing with the phones for me at the moment with these kids is the bullying aspect. Whereas before, to be bullied, you predominantly had to be in the playground or somewhere where the bully could get at you. You can now go in your own bedroom, shut the door, and you can still be bullied because somebody's popping up on your screen and have a pop at you. And that, for me, alone, would negate the reason for me to give my child a phone and say, right, disappear and do what you want with it. It needs to be controlled because it's destroying some of these kids. It really is, and it's horrible.
I thought I was going to completely agree with you until I heard you two just now, and I think I've changed my mind because you sound like Luddites having this debate. Now, listen, I feel like it's one of those topics we need loads of disclaimers. So I don't think primary school kids should have their own smartphones. I think it's terrible the way social media is being used for bullying and self-harm. I think we really need to monitor what children do on technology generally. But when you see kids on smartphones, don't assume you know what they're doing. So, for example, my daughter swipes my iPhone whenever she can. She's 7. I found that she's been directing, cutting and editing her own movie about, she turned one of her dolls into a robot and she's making this robot movie. At school, they learn how to make and edit their own film. It's amazing. It's so creative. She does coding workshops. Now when she gets the phone, she'll be learning code. She'll be trying to develop her own apps. I think it's incredible.
What school does your daughter go to?
7-year-old.
Is there any chance she could come to your place?
I want to go there.
She sounds a lot brighter than you.
Yeah. Her school sets maths challenges on the smartphone, which I have an issue with because it assumes not all parents can afford smartphones, and I don't think we should assume that all kids, you know, I don't think their schoolwork should be dependent on having access to technology that's very expensive. But the reality is that it can be a really useful educational tool, and kids don't just, you know, I think we always assume that they're just addicted to gaming and Instagram. They're so much more creative than that. And let me just, before you come in, I've got a teacher. Just listen to my teacher, Andrew Langlands.
There's a lot of good educational tools out there you can use for learning. All the way through up to sort of sixth form who want to get to university, and I think it's a really important part of education these days. So I think a blanket ban's probably going to really struggle.
I'm not saying it's okay for kids to be texting in school, but there are uses for smartphones.
I get you, and the last thing I am on this planet is a Luddite, all right? Seriously, okay? But there's a time and a place for to be doing that stuff, and you can't just let a kid roam free with these phones when they're doing all sorts of stuff that the parents don't know about. If your kid swipes your phone and does something, that's fine. Have it for half an hour. I could probably give mine to my grandkids or whatever. Do you know what I mean? That's not a problem. But it's when they're disappearing, doing their own stuff. You know, you can't see what they're doing. You can't monitor it. You can't scroll back on what they've been up to. That's when it's a problem.
I mean, we still need common sense. I agree.
Yeah. I am so happy because I agree with Afua. I agree with Afua. Just for clarification, are you saying they can have regular phones? It's the smartphone that worries you, just old-fashioned phones?
Just to give you a bit of context, I bought myself this week, this old piece of kit, purely because I want people in a business context to be able to call me. They don't need to be like doing all manner of stuff with me, just calling's fine. So
they can have a regular phone? You don't have a problem with that? So they can ring mum or dad?
If a parent, because parents will push back and go, I want my kid to have a phone for safety reasons, no problem. If you really need it for a safety reason, then there you go.
And the problem there is, and then we must let other people in, and I do totally agree, you know, speaking as a parent, and I wonder if this is the parenting coming out here, you could say, well, you don't need a really nice bicycle. You should just have the most basic bicycle. What do you want those trainers for? I can get them for $11.99 out of one of those cheap shops. Or lastly, what do you need that particular item of clothing? Or, you know, kids are pre-programmed to want as much as they can.
Before I
would
bring Rich
suggest.
in, 1 in 4 children under the age of 6 has a smartphone. I mean, come on.
We agree.
It's completely nuts. I mean, I think that to coin a cliche, the genie is so far out of the bottle, and it's learned behaviour. I mean, children see their parents completely addicted to their smartphones. They want what their mummies and daddies have got. But Michelle is right. If they need a phone, they don't necessarily need a smartphone. And let's just hear from a head teacher who says it's actually a safety issue to have children with phones.
Parents feel that it's really important that some of our children who walk 2 or 3 miles every day just to get to school, parents feel safer that their child has a mobile phone. Some of the children can be as young as 8 and 9. If they're walking to school, parents want that comfort, that security of knowing that if their child needs them, they can get hold of them quite quickly.
I interviewed a jockey who was on a pony on a moor from the age of 4, and her father gave her just one of those and just said, ring me if you fall off or you need a new shoe or something. Press the green button twice. I like the old days where if you wanted to ring Michelle up and make a date, you had to speak to Michelle's mum first and ring on the landline.
I never got through. I'm going to give you all a test. Are you ready? In 2015, a study by the London School of Economics looked at schools that banned mobile phones from lessons, the level of improvement. So what is the percentage, work done by the London School of Economics, schools that banned mobile phones from lessons, test results improved by what percentage?
Well, I remember this because I read the research as well, and there was no improvement, and there was as bad as if they ate too many potatoes or something.
What was the
I don't remember.
I'd say it probably increases it because you can Google all your answers, can't you?
30%.
30.
50.
50.
I'll go.
I know you, and you're trying to discredit my argument, which means it's a tiny percentage. So I'm going to claim foul with the stats and say that there was some kind of issue.
I'm going for 40%.
40. The number is, and we'll show you, 6. 6%. Is it that much? It supports our argument. Is it that much of a destructive force?
Well, what I would say to that is I would say that children in the classrooms, I know for a fact, right, 2 things. First of all, yes,
they are. You saw through my stunt, by the way.
I know you.
You were too clever.
First of all, that's why I didn't indulge. First of all, they do get distracted by telephones. Second of all, they do leverage them as social media bullying tools often. Yes, they can be technology learning aids, which is fantastic. So have them school supplied in the classrooms, for you to use your point. Yeah. But ultimately, you've got all these parents, you've got many parents that can't afford smartphones, that feel pressured to buy smartphones because to keep up with the Joneses of the rest of the kids in their classroom. And I think that is absolutely
that's individual
ludicrous.
response. That's their stupidity.
Can I just talk, can we talk about
trying to do
one other
for their
thing?
child?
Michelle, I so agree with Michelle, but also
Thanks,
when a child has a smartphone, the data on the smartphone, the sites they're visiting, the things they're looking at, the messages they're sending are completely private to that child, to that user. And we have seen a teenager called Molly Russell, who took her own life. And now her parents are having to take Instagram and Facebook to court to reveal the data and the sites she's used. You do not know where your child is going if they have a smartphone. Yeah. By all means, give them a phone, an analogue phone, but a smartphone, you do not know.
I mean, I'm not advocating giving primary school children their own smartphone to use as they want. I don't think there's any substitute for good parenting for monitoring what your child is doing, whether it's smartphone or not.
You can't.
I know. Well, that's not true. You can monitor how your children
You're monitoring yours.
I monitor it. I look at the history. I have to log on for her. She can't buy things without me.
Okay.
You know, and I think that's why I wouldn't give her her own. She doesn't have her own, no, and I wouldn't give her own one until she's much older.
What age?
I mean, we've already had this. Mummy, when am I going to get my own one? I said 16. She said 11.
Yeah.
So,
I put down 10.
It's an art, not a science, and all parents. I mean, I think it's interesting that the way you're saying this, Michelle, because you're almost saying we should legislate or do something to make parents be more sensible. When we've had conversations like this about other things, like, for example, employers who want their staff to eat vegetarian food, you've been very much against the kind of nanny state.
What, but in a way, this morning when I turned up and I wanted my regular chocolate bar, and I was told I couldn't get one because of a drive for healthy eating. You mean like that?
Yeah, well, I couldn't get my salt because we're on a zero carbon footprint, no sachets with disposable. Anyway, that's
a very off topic. Where are we?
The point is,
I'm glad I ride my motorbike.
I don't think you're advocating banning.
In classrooms, I am. I'm advocating.
I mean, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think kids should be on smartphones in class. But I'm saying, don't assume that all smartphone uses are bad and destructive. There's loads of positive things kids do with them.
But there's a time and a place for all this stuff. There's a time and a place for all this stuff.
I agree.
So we'll agree on some of it. Some of it, I'm a Luddite. Anyway, shut up, because I've got a phone call to make.